The Founding Fathers wanted to set up a country of freedom. And so they looked at the different kinds of governments that have been tried throughout the history of the world. One of them, of course, that they lived under at the time was ruler's law. In other words, the law of the king is the law of the land. Whatever the king says, or whatever the king points, is the law. Ruler's law proved to be a really oppressive system for the Founding Fathers. They felt like they were being taxed without having any representation to contribute or object to the taxes. So the Founding Fathers did not like ruler's law. So they did the Declaration of Independence, became an independent nation. As they set up the country, they started a thing called the Articles of Confederation, which was basically like a constitution for the new country. The Articles of Confederation were based on the premise that each individual state was the sovereign, and that the Articles of Confederation provided for all these individual states to make a kind of a super committee where they would work together in a confederation. And so therefore they got government based on state sovereignty. They fought the Revolutionary War under the Articles of Confederation, and they almost lost the war, because the Articles of Confederation did not provide for any kind of a president or to guide the efforts of the war. They did not provide for any way for the national government to collect taxes to pay for the needs of the army. And so basically they almost lost the war. We're grateful to the Lord and for helping George Washington be able to win the war in spite of the fact that he didn't have enough money for food for his soldiers, and didn't have enough money to buy them boots in the winter. And many of them died of sickness and hunger, and some of them deserted because they had no way of support. So the Founding Fathers almost lost their country. They didn't like ruler's law, they didn't like state sovereignty, complete state sovereignty. And so they decided to start up a new thing, and that is base their law on people's law, where the entire sovereignty was based on the people. So the people would elect their state legislatures. The state legislatures would elect the senators to the national government. The people in the states would be divided up into districts, and the districts would each elect a representative to go back to the Congress to make the laws. And so they set up a system based in people's law. Based on people's law, they wrote a Constitution of the United States, in which we, the people, delegated to the national government certain duties, responsibilities, and rights. They did not give everything to the federal government. They wanted to reserve a lot of the rights and a lot of the responsibilities and duties to this individual states and to the people. So this became a kind of a combination based on the people, the sovereignty of the people. Then they would have the states' rights, and they would have the national rights. So it was a combination. And that is what we call federalism. The founders of America set up a federalist form of government for our country. Federalist form of government means that some powers and responsibilities were delegated by the people to the general government, the national government. These powers are specifically listed in Article 1, Section 8 of the Constitution, and all other powers and responsibilities were reserved to the individual state governments as emphasized in the 10th Amendment, or they were reserved to the people. Accordingly, states have rightly accepted the responsibilities to outlaw and punish certain crimes, such as murder, theft, vandalism, arson, prostitution, white-collar crime, drunken driving, and the like. The Founding Fathers set up the National Constitution based on these principles I've been talking about as principles of people's law. And they also wanted to keep a balance in it so that they wouldn't go too far to anarchy, and they wouldn't go to one direction, they wouldn't go too far toward tyranny in the other direction. So they tried to keep a balanced center. So they set up checks and balances and separations of powers vertically and horizontally. And what I've just been describing, the federalist system, separates the powers vertically between the national government and the state governments. Then they needed some kind of a philosophy for economics, and they turned to the writings of Adam Smith. Adam Smith's teachings taught the Founding Fathers that government should only attempt to prevent 4 things: force, fraud, monopoly, and debauchery. The founders wanted the states to prevent and punish those 4 vices. Now, of course, you all know that the vice of debauchery includes things like prostitution, pornography, drunkenness, drugs, poisons, methamphetamines, indecent exposure, public endangerment or public nuisances, abortion, child abuse, gambling, reckless driving, etc. In short, the thing I'm reading is a list of some of the vices in the vice of debauchery. In short, this list includes anything that is a gross sin and or can harm other people. The inspired Constitution prevents the national government from doing anything but the things listed in Article 1 and in Article 3 of the Constitution. It can only prosecute the sins that are listed in the Constitution. Thus, all other sins and all debauchery sins should only be prosecuted at the state or local levels. Now, this is an example here. I understand that the national government has no national policy on prostitution. It has been up to the states to outlaw prostitution. Most have done so, except Nevada. Until Roe v. Wade, it had been up to the states to outlaw abortion. I believe all had done so. It is important to evaluate things in the context, and in this case, in the context of the Constitution. Now, to summarize the separation of powers, the federalist form of government set up by the Founding Fathers for our country is structured with a vertical separation of powers, the national government vertically above the states, as follows. The national government, powers and responsibilities delegated to the national government or the general government, as specifically listed in Article 1, Section 8 and Article 3, Section 3 of the United States Constitution, include the following. The power to outlaw and punish these 3 vices: force, fraud, and treason. Treason is a debauchery. So the forces that the national government was supposed to outlaw and punish were, in the category of forces, piracies committed on the high seas, felonies committed on the seas, such as offshore crimes, offenses against the law of nations, insurrections and rebellions, and invasions. The frauds that the United States general government was supposed to outlaw and punish include counterfeiting the securities of the United States and counterfeiting the coin of the United States. And then the debauchery that the national government was supposed to punish was treason. According to the Constitution, these are the type of things that the national government should outlaw and punish. The Constitution also gives the national government limited powers, and these powers are listed in this list here. The power to define or regulate or promote or provide the following. Number 1, lay and collect taxes, duties, imposts, and excises. 2, pay the debts for defense and the needs of the whole United States. Number 3, borrow money. Number 4, regulate commerce with other nations and the Indian tribes. Number 5, regulate commerce among the states. Number 6, rules of naturalization. Number 7, uniform bankruptcy laws. Number 8, coin money and regulate its value and the value of foreign coin. Number 9, fixed standard of weights and measures. Number 10, post offices and post roads. Number 11, securing limited time copyrights and patents. Number 12, constitute tribunals below the Supreme Court. Number 13, define offshore crimes. Number 14, declare war and issue rules of war, etc. Number 15, provide for defense via the Army, Navy, militia, etc. Number 16, regulate all affairs of the District of Columbia. 17, regulate affairs of federal forts, buildings, and docks. And number 18, regulate all departments of the United States government. So those are the 18 powers of the national government, and then you add to those the powers to outlaw 5 different forces and 2 frauds and 1 debauchery, treason. That is what the national government is allowed to do. So it's a limited scope of things the national government can do. The individual state governments, on the other hand, have all other powers and responsibilities besides the ones that were listed specifically in the Constitution that I read off to you just now. The 10th Amendment of the Constitution says that all powers not delegated to the national government are reserved to the individual states or to the people. And in this section of the state governments have the power to outlaw and punish the 4 vices. They can outlaw and punish the forces of murder, rape, assault, battery, theft, arson, sabotage, theft, etc. They can outlaw and punish the frauds of perjury and false witnessing, lying and embezzlement, white-collar crime, false advertising, etc., etc. Number 3, they have the power to outlaw and punish the monopolies of dishonest labor union practices, unfair subsidies for individual companies, enforcement of politically correct thinking, news monopolies, or blackouts. So the states have the right to prevent these things that I just listed. Unfair subsidies to individual companies, playing favorites. They can outlaw politically correct thinking enforcement, etc. And the states can outlaw and punish the following debaucheries: prostitution, pornography, indecent exposure, broadcast profanity, abortion and euthanasia, child abuse, sexual, physical, or emotional, child adoption by practicing homosexuals, gambling and the lottery, animal cruelty, drugs such as marijuana, LSD, cocaine and heroin, alcohol and tobacco, and drug pushing, public endangerment or nuisances such as poisons and meth, drunk driving and public drunkenness, unguarded explosives, reckless driving, any action that could harm other people, and other gross sins as defined by the states. The Founding Fathers said that the powers given to the national government are limited and numbered. The powers reserved to the states are infinite and unnumbered. The states also have the power to define or regulate or provide the following: they can define marriage, they can administer divorce, they can provide roads and define their uses, etc. So I hope that kind of shows that the separation of powers between the national government and the state governments allows for the proper government to work on the 4 vices that Adam Smith said that the government should fight against: force, fraud, monopoly, and debauchery. Thank you.